Board activities of October 12, 2023. To start the day off, I'd like to ask our Assistant Chief Safety Officer, Jamie Johnson, to provide us with our safety contact. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. Good morning. Metro is fortunate to have a Metro Transit Police Department dedicated solely to the security of customers, staff, and property at Metro, covering the buses, trains, Metro access, and our facilities. But with Washington, D.C. playing such a central role in global politics, when events occur around the world, implications are often felt in DC and across the wider region. Alongside law enforcement and intelligence agencies across the region, Metro is monitoring events in the Middle East and possible implications for our customers and staff. While we have no evidence of any credible threats at this time, Metro urges customers and staff to remain especially vigilant. And if you see something, say something. Please report anything that is suspicious, out of place, out of the ordinary, or of concern to the Metro Transit Police Department by calling 202-962-2121 or by texting 69683, which spells my MTPD, and you may also dial 911. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Good morning again, everyone, and welcome to today's Safety and Operations Committee. Thank you for joining us. Just a note, Chair Drummer isn't feeling well today and is unable to join us. And since Ms. Martin Proctor, the committee's vice chair, is also out today, you're stuck with me. Before we get started, I'll ask the board corporate secretary to call the roll.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe.
Present.
Mr. Smedberg.
Present.
Dr. Helfer. Ms. Worth.
Present.
Mr. Letourneau.
Present.
Ms. Klein. Mr. McAndrew.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. Are there any objections by members of the committee to the agenda as amended? Paul, it's just you and me. Okay. Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented.
Right.
Now to the approval of minutes. We have the minutes of our September 28th meeting. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. We have 3 informational updates on our agenda this morning. First, we'll hear about plans for overnight bus service in the District of Columbia, which is part of the Better Bus Initiative and is funded by the district. Next, we'll get an update on the Metro Transit Police Department's community policing and engagement efforts and the resulting decrease in crime on Metro. Our final presentation this morning will be an update on the derailment outside of National Airport on Friday, September 29th, and the safety assurance actions Metro staff have taken following that incident. I will turn the floor over to Mr. Jones and Ms. Davis to start us off.
Good morning, Chair Lowe, board members, and Mr. Clark. I'm Leroy Jones, and I serve in the role of Senior Vice President here at WMATA. Today, Allison Davis and myself are pleased to update the board on the overnight bus service which will be funded by the District of Columbia. Thank you. There we go. So this presentation will provide an update and status of ongoing activities to support the implementation of the overnight bus service, as well as the next steps in the process. It would be helpful if I turned it on. I apologize. Okay. So this service supports two of the four goals in the strategic transformation plan: service excellence and regional opportunity and partnership. When you think about the 24/7 service, it definitely supports the service excellence goal. Collaboration and discussions that we've had ongoing with DC definitely supports regional opportunity and partnership. So to demonstrate continuous improvement for our customers, we're looking forward to the implementation of this overnight bus service in DC in December. The 13 routes will operate from our Montgomery, Bladensburg, and Shepherd Parkway bus garages. And just for everyone's awareness, most of these routes already provide 20 to almost 23 hours of service today. In addition, we already have bus supervisors and police that are working overnight to support the service that I just referenced. Our goal is to always have a process that is transparent and a process that's inclusive. The proposed service was included in the board-approved FY24 budget. During that process, our outreach team did engage with residents in the region to allow people the opportunity to provide input. We did conduct a survey, and there were a few questions in the survey about DC all-night bus proposal. In summary, 74% of the respondents were in favor of the overnight bus service, and 70% of the respondents said that this change would increase the likelihood of them using the service. This public feedback was favorable and helpful through the process. So as you can see on this slide, it provides the current service pattern, the proposed service pattern, and the 13 routes. The 13 routes will provide 24/7 bus service from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. with a frequency of 12 minutes or better, and from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. with a frequency of 20 minutes or better. The service that you can see is more consistent and easier for our customers to understand. On this slide. So from an equity perspective, these 13 routes went through a Title VI analysis in 2021 prior to the implementation of the Frequent Service Network. These routes are already part of the Frequent Service Network today, and there were other factors that were considered outside of the Frequent Service Network and the Title VI analysis that I just referenced. We also considered high ridership and major corridors. So when you think about the 52 that runs along 14th Street, one of our busiest routes and heavy ridership routes, the 70 that runs along Georgia Avenue and 7th Street, the S2 on 16th Street in Northwest, the 92 that runs on U Street and crosstowns to Concord Heights in Southeast, and the X2, another heavy ridership route in the major corridor along 8th Street in Northwest and Northeast that goes to Northwest as well, and the 33 that runs along Pennsylvania Avenue in Northwest and along Wisconsin Avenue. We also considered that this overnight bus service would provide access to workers in the service industry, which we all know is very important. These routes will provide service to major hospitals like the Washington Hospital Center, the downtown port to support the office maintenance staff that maintain those facilities, and the DC nightlife when you think about U Street, Adams Morgan, Georgetown, and the West End. And lastly, in 2020, a late night and early morning mobility study was conducted to better understand late night and early morning transportation markets throughout the region. The study revealed something very interesting. The annual median wage of late shift workers was $30,000 at the time, which was $5,000 lower than the median pay for daytime workers. who work behind the scenes to support our region. We believe that adding this service will not only increase capacity and improve frequency, but it ultimately will improve access and increase ridership. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Allison Davis.
All right, good morning. So we are currently working with an agreement with the district to finalize all of this. So with when the district appropriated this money back in the spring in the 24 budget, that required an agreement, and that really it lays out what are those routes that we're going to do, what is the service level we're going to provide, how is that going to be funded, like what's the payment structure and everything like that. But it's also looking forward to, what is our communications plan, all of those different security and other expenses that go along with expanding service at this time. So that is underway, and we've been working hard going through all of that information. But we do have a preliminary service start date of mid-December, but this is not the only service that we are working to implement in December. So that is preliminary, and we will be organizing that in the weeks to come. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, thanks, Allison. So in total, there are 75 positions that we're working to fill that's associated with this service. And I'm happy to report that we have a healthy pool of applicants for the critical positions, such as bus operators and bus supervisors, that are definitely needed to operate and manage this service. And from a police perspective, as you can see on this slide, we have 7 positions there that's slated to go to Chief Gonzalo. It's important to note that it takes about 1 year to train a transit police officer. And I think that's a good segue into the next slide to talk a little bit about the security strategy. An important component of implementing the overnight bus service definitely is to ensure that we have a good outline for our security strategy. So based on crime data, Chief Gonzalo's team has already increased patrols at bus hubs, specifically at Silver Spring and Acostia, and on bus lines, the X2 and the 70. As you can see on this slide here, this is some of the work that's already ongoing with the Chief's team. This photo was taken last week on the X2 in Chinatown, where the officers go out and conduct checks on bus operators just to kind of make sure everything is going okay and everything is going well. We have also increased the number of officers overnight from 8 to 12 over the midnight shift, with additional officers to be added in the future. Lastly, to ensure transparency with our police partners in the region, we did reach out to the Metropolitan Police Department to let them know that we would have more buses on the road overnight when we implement this service in the very near future. And thank you, and I'll turn it over to Allison to close us out.
So one thing we realized when we did the late night, early morning mobility study back in 2020-21 was people didn't even know that we've got that late night bus service. So this is even more making sure that we get the word out that span, that gap that Leroy mentioned before, that people know that it is closed, that this is an option. And again, it's really making sure that the workforce, that's hospitality, that's food service, that's hospitals, that third shift workers know that this is an option, because that's really, I think, really the target of who we're trying to reach. So yes, there's the internal communication, making sure that we are working with our union leadership and frontline staff to know that this is coming out, but then also making sure that we're getting the word out to different potential customers. And so that's having that overnight map and making sure that that's throughout the system. It's online. It's making it into the network of the restaurant workers and the like, and then also updating that signage so that information is out. And again, it's not that first night everyone knows about it, but it's again making sure that we've updated in all the various places so that it just becomes part and parcel with knowing that transit is an option. So with that, we'll wrap up. The next step is, like I said, finalizing that agreement with the district, and then entering into that and signing it with the district, and then amending the 24 operating budget to have this on there. So with that, we'll take any questions that you might have.
Thanks for that presentation. Any questions from the committee? Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison, question for you on this agreement. If you have a projected start date of December 15th, when do you need to have this agreement in place and say the board approve it?
I will have to get back to you on that. It is a work in progress.
I can jump in for you, Allison. The intent was to do the briefing today to bring it to the board in 2 weeks for the board meeting. Okay. Yeah, which I apologize. I thought we mentioned that last month for the cycle, because that way it's inked and then we can do the final implementation for December.
And Leroy, how you said some of the routes are already 23 hours. If they go to 24 hours, what kind of staffing issues will you have?
When you say,
are they pretty simple ones to handle?
We're pretty good. From a bus operator standpoint, we're well positioned to implement this service from day one. As I mentioned, we have a healthy pool of applicants already in the pool that we're onboarding. Also, supervisors are already working overnight. And again, we're just closing the gap, right? So we're well positioned to be ready to implement on day one.
So it won't implement your service in the next shift, say 7 a.m. to 3 or 4?
There would be no impact to the service that we're running today once we go to 24/7, no.
Okay. And Allison, one last question. The agreement you're working on with the district, does that include capturing actual costs, or how are you approaching it?
So it is similar. We have estimated based on the additional trips and hours, revenue hours and stuff. We are putting that in there, as well as the costs for communication and security. So we've kind of worked through when we were working with the district back in the spring to get it into their budget, there were those cost estimates that went into that. Okay. To define all of those. So
these aren't necessarily overtime costs that are going in. These are people that are already working shifts.
This is additional, and the hiring that we're doing to be able to provide that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from the committee? Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to our next item then, which is the MPPD Public Safety Update. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Chair and members of the board, the purpose of our presentation today is to apprise you of our recent efforts within the Operations Director to continue to enhance security of our customers and employees throughout the system, while also ensuring that we expand our efforts in assisting those among us in need of support services and continuing our excellent community service programs. Pardon me, folks. Awesome. Chief Gonzalo and I have been before this committee 4 times in the last year, discussing a variety of public safety initiatives. Though the details of the information we discuss may change, the themes do not. Although this agency's primary mission is transit, the authority is clearly invested in the DMV community. We're pleased to provide an update on the progress of many MTPD initiatives, including our efforts in crisis intervention and community outreach work, an update on our body-worn camera program and the use of video to monitor our stations, buses, and trains, and the effect our high-visibility police patrols and partnerships have had in significantly reducing crime on our system. Go ahead, sir.
The objective of MTPD's crime reduction strategy is to ensure that all customers and employees feel safe when using the Metro system and delivering transportation services. There are several ongoing projects to support this goal, including increasing the number of special police officers, improving fare gate enforcement and fare gate infrastructure, and enhancing community outreach. We are tracking the success of these projects and changes through key performance indicators. Our first indicator is whether we see a reduction in Part 1 and Part 2 crimes. Part 1 crimes include crimes such as assault, robbery, theft, arson, murder, rape, whereas Part 2 crimes are crimes such as simple assault, vandalism, carrying a weapon. It's important to note that jurisdictions may classify crimes differently. For example, a crime considered a theft in one jurisdiction may be considered a robbery in another. We're also tracking crisis intervention outcomes and case clearances rates as part of our key performance indicators.
We currently have 6 crisis intervention specialists deployed throughout the system, and we're in the process of onboarding 4 more. Our expectation is to have all 10 sometime this fall. Our specialists are focused on reacting to reports of finding individuals on our system who are in need of mental health services. The assistance also includes obtaining shelter for the unhoused, drug and alcohol intervention services, and mental health assistance. We track metrics as part of the team's performance, and as illustrated on the slide, their performance, in part measured by the volume of their work, has been excellent. It should be noted that key aspects of their job function include engaging with their fellow employees and serving as an additional presence in the field throughout our system. The specialists collect real-time data using an app that was developed in-house by our IT team on their smartphones. We've been thrilled with the success of this program, and I believe it is one of the most impactful steps that we have undertaken to represent Metro as a progressive public agency. This program was implemented based on the general manager's recommendation, as he had instituted a very similar program at Cap Metro in Austin.
Crisis intervention specialists respond to a variety of calls with sworn MTPD personnel. They assist patrons experiencing a mental health crisis and those who are homeless in the Metro system. Typical calls include people who are suicidal, disorderly, suspicious, intoxicated behaviors, as well as welfare checks. The crisis intervention team staff coordinates service referrals and decision-making with other service providers, both government and NGOs. A key part of the department's mission is the outstanding work they do with the youth and of the communities we serve. I'd be remiss if I didn't cite our Director of Police Community Services Bureau, Ms. Chandra Lewis, for her leadership in this area. Our community outreach includes youth programming, which I'll speak more to on the next slide, but we also conduct broader community engagement through weekly outreach events. So far in 2023, we've held 367 outreach events where we provided safety awareness and crime prevention tips. We've also started a community police academy at the general manager's initiative. It's an 8-week program to experience areas of police training. We started the first class on September 20th. We have a holistic emphasis on the youth of our service area. We provide mentoring through the Youth Advisory Council and support the D.C. Office of the Attorney General's Restorative Justice Program. We also have staff has also enhanced high visibility details throughout the bus and rail systems to promote safe passage to and from school. Through all of our youth programming, we recognize these young men and women are the future of our region and our ridership.
Part of the methodology in rolling out body-worn cameras in law enforcement has been the hope that deployment can provide transparency and accountability to individuals involved in law enforcement activities, as well as ideally de-escalate confrontational situations. Body-worn cameras have been issued to MTPD officers, sergeants, and lieutenants when working in an operational assignment. Cameras have been issued to 327 officers and special police officers. Deployment was completed as of September 26th. In addition, Metro has over 20,000 cameras between buses, trains, and stations to assist with public safety, operations and emergency management, as well as incident and accident investigation. The rollout of the Metro Integrated Command and Communication Center, which is scheduled to commence operation this Saturday, October 14th at 8 p.m. We've established a Video 1 position on our command line within the control center. This position will serve a vital function in viewing and obtaining video for their rail, bus, police, communications, fire services, and safety peers. We're convinced that our use of video in this manner will align us with industry best practices and increase safety, security, and operational efficiencies within our system.
WMATA has entered into reimbursable MOUs with local police agencies, which has increased law enforcement presence at selected stations in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. We have also enhanced our special police visibility. In total, there are 5 local police agencies that are stationed at 11 stations during peak hours. Special police officers cover 25 stations in the District of Columbia from open to close. As of February 10, MPD is providing support at Anacostia, Fort Totten, Gallery Place, Metro Center, and Union Station with 2 hours per shift per station. Greenbelt Police is covering Greenbelt Station with 2 officers per shift, which also started in mid-February. Cheverly covers Cheverly Metro Station with 2 officers per shift, which started in March. And the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority is covering Reagan National Airport and Washington Dulles Airport with 2 officers per shift. This also started mid-February. Alexandria signed on. However, they've been a little bit intermittent due to staffing, but their 2 stations are Eisenhower and King Street in Old Town. The stations that are currently staffed are shown on this table on this first slide here, to include Potomac Avenue, Stadium Armory, Fort Totten, Minnesota Avenue, Columbia Heights, Shaw, and Rhode Island. Currently, more analysis is needed to determine the effectiveness of increased patrol visibility at Congress Heights, Georgia Avenue, and Noma.
Through supplemental staffing, we've been able to enhance visibility of special police at 5 parking garages. These are Branch Ave, Downtown Largo, New Carrollton, Southern Ave, and Suitland. The table here shows the decrease in Part 1 crimes, which, if you'll recall, are crimes such as assault, robbery, theft, and arson. We've seen a 31% decrease in Part 1 crimes between May and September compared to the beginning of 2023, as reflected in the charts on the slide.
As a result of enhanced policing and fair enforcement, we've seen a reduction in Part 1 felonies and Part 2 misdemeanors in Quarter 3 of 2023. We've seen a reduction of about 6% compared to Quarter 2. At the same time, we've been increasing the number of firearms used each month, making the system safer. The additional law enforcement support has allowed us to enhance our efforts and be more visible. This approach has resulted in a 274% increase in enforcement. Metro worked with the D.C. government and D.C. Office of Administrative Hearings to assist with issuing citations. It took us over a year to get the citations developed and printed.
Fair enforcement overall has increased in 2023 year-to-date compared to 2022. Stationing police at points of entry has been extremely effective in reducing both crime and disorderly conduct in our stations. Arrests for fare evasions occur in Maryland and Virginia and typically occur as a result of someone not complying with the citation process and assaulting officers. In D.C., someone would be arrested for unlawful entry if they refuse to leave the station once they fare evaded. As the chart on the slide illustrates, our fair enforcement activities and actions have increased exponentially in 2023. Finally, we've seen an increase in closure rates. Currently, MTPD has a higher closure rate than the national average. Officers are shortening response times and detectives are following up through investigations. We have a 100% clearance rate for homicide offenses, and about 2/3 of assault offenses have been closed. As you can see illustrated on the chart, in some cases, our clearance rates are double and almost triple the national average. We hope this presentation shows that through a multitude of efforts, an increase in enforcement and a reduction in crime has occurred throughout our system. This is based on the hard work of the MPD, our jurisdictional partners, our special police, all ably assisted by reports from their operating, infrastructure, and safety teammates. And Madam Chair, if I might, I just want to call out Chief Anzalo for personal recognition. Through his leadership and his mentorship of the department and this agency, I think he's made a huge difference to our riding public and to his operating peers at the agency. And I don't think, I've been here for a brief amount of time. From what I've heard from people who've been here far longer than I have, there's never been coordination better than it is right now with Chief in charge with his operating peers. And I think any one of them would say that. So with that, we'd be happy to take any questions or comments that you or the board may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief, and thank you, Mr. Dwyer. And I couldn't agree more. With clearance rates like this, it's clear that every star on those shoulders is well deserved. Thank you, Chief. I've got some questions about the crisis intervention team. And if we could go back to the slide with their KPIs on it, that might be helpful. Because my first question is, I'd like to understand what the difference is between a connection and a contact. We have 800 connections, 770 contacts. I don't know what those are.
Yeah, so the connections also include employees as well. So that's what the connection. And the connection, sometimes an example, like if there's a traumatic event that occurs with a Metro employee, such as a death or serious injury or something like that, we make our crisis intervention folks available to the different departments.
Okay.
Contacts are actually with actual customers that we serve, and that's the difference. It's
Okay.
more of a vernacular thing, and we could probably make it a little bit more clear.
I mean, that's fine. The 770 is a subset of the 800.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And at this point, how many crisis intervention team members do we have?
Well, we've hired a couple more with interviews. I think we have a total of 5. We've lost one left, but we have 5 more in the queue that should be hired, if all goes well, probably by the end of November. So we'll have a total of 10.
Are we growing this beyond 10?
I think the success of it so far, I mean, obviously I'd have to talk with Mr. Dwyer and the general manager, but I think the goal, I think, of the general manager, I can't speak for him, but in our talks with him, is to see the success of this group and see how they do. And he gave us the authority to expand to 10, which will enable us to cover more shifts. So currently, when we initially started with the 4, we were moving them around quite a bit, particularly between midnights and day work and early evening. But with the expansion to 10, that'll give us more coverage throughout the entire week, Sunday to Saturday, on all 3 shifts, both day work and midnights.
Feels like that might also enhance retention if we can offer more predictable schedules.
Yes.
When someone texts my MTPD for a wellness check, is it a crisis intervention team member that responds? If
they will respond eventually, but usually we'll dispatch a police officer first, and then a crisis intervention specialist. As long as there's one working during that particular time, they'll go with the police officer.
Okay. What is the crisis intervention team member distribution between bus and rail?
We're more heavily on rail, to be honest with you. With the additional 10, we could definitely start doing a lot more on bus than we currently do.
Fantastic. I know you and I corresponded about this previously, but could you tell me what the status of special police officers carrying Narcan is?
We do have some out in the system right now. I'd have to check to see if all the special police officers through Allied are carrying it presently. That I don't have the answer to. But we did start a rollout with the Allied contractor, and most of them do. I just have to be certain that all 111 of them do have it.
Okay. And then finally, I wanted to clarify something from your presentation. I wasn't sure whether, did I catch that special police officers, they're also wearing body-worn cameras?
Special police officers are not.
They are not?
They're not, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so the body-worn cameras are only for the MTPD officers.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. Any other questions from the committee? Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, I have a question on your slide 21. Keep going. Yep.
No, I think that's 17. 20, I think one more.
One more. That's it right there.
Excellent.
Chief, the top, the local police agencies you mentioned, I think you may have partially answered my question, Alexandria, but I think you have agreements with other communities as well, don't you? Police departments and other law enforcement agencies.
Well, this particular agreement, this is for reimbursable overtime, but yes, throughout the Metro system, we do have agreements through MOUs through all the local police departments that fall within the jurisdiction of Metro.
So some of those people are out, but may not be highlighted here on this slide.
Yeah, so these folks here, we actually ended up getting a grant this year, actually, for, I think it's 2.7, don't hold me to that, $1 million to fund this reimbursable overtime for these outside agencies. But these are the only agencies thus far that we have. Arlington looks like they're getting ready to sign, and the city of Rockville looks like they're going to sign. So we're still working with the others.
and in general been successful and helpful?
Yeah,
to you all?
I think if you look at the statistics, the period of time before we had the outside agencies and those particular stations to about the same period of time afterwards, I mean, we've seen about a 30, I think it's a 31% reduction in serious crime at those stations. So it definitely helps. I mean, it's really about the presence and then the enforcement that's out there. That definitely helps. You know, and it's tough for the outside agencies too, because, you know, like us, they're faced with staffing shortages. So a lot of it really is just regional goodwill. We try to help them out. They try to help us out.
And I appreciate what Mr. Dwyer said about your leadership. We've seen the change in the department over the last couple of years, but also please pass along our thanks to the person who's actually coordinating these programs and
Definitely
doing it day to day. So make sure they know how much we appreciate all these
I
efforts.
certainly will. I definitely appreciate the board's support and everybody's support, but it's really the men and women of the police department that do this.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions from the committee?
So the grant that we've received, is that, a one-time grant? Is it ongoing funds? How will we be able to get, what's the status of that?
That's a good question. I'm not a grants person, but I know it's $2.7 million. I'm not sure of like how long it lasts or if it's just a one-time thing. That I couldn't answer for you.
We'll find out and get back to you directly.
Tom, would you like to provide some context?
Any other questions from any member of the board? Okay, thank you so much, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Dwyer.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next item, which is the derailment and 2K, 3K update.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Jamie Johnson. I'm the Assistant Chief Safety Officer here at Metro. This is an update on the derailment that occurred on Friday, September the 29th, just south of National Airport. There were no injuries. I will provide a timeline of events, provide details of the investigation, repairs to the track, and how we communicated with our customers. And will then hand over to my colleague, Shashil Ramirez, who is the Chief Mechanical Officer, ultimately responsible for our trains, to explain some more specific details about the 2000 and 3000 series rail cars. To emphasize, the investigation is still ongoing and information is still emerging, but we wanted to provide the board and the public with what we know now. So what I'll do here is just walk through the timeline of events so everyone is clear on what occurred. So on Friday, a 3000 series, and it's a mixed train between 2 and 3000 series rail cars. One of the 3000 series rail cars dropped a brake disc, which landed on the tracks outside National Airport Metro Station to the south on an aerial structure. And at 10:47 a.m., a 7000 series train heading south towards Franconia, Springfield, hit that brake disc and the first car derailed. The initial response was led by the train operator, obviously, and then Metro Integrated Command and Communication Center took prompt control of the scene with resources at the scene deployed under the incident management framework that we have to ensure the scene safety, and we promptly evacuated 43 passengers to another train and then back to the platform. Train service returned at around 1 p.m. on Friday, and we single-tracked around that derailed train, so that remained in situ. Because we rapidly identified that this brake disc was potentially part of the incident, Shashil immediately began inspections of those 2000 and 3000 fleet brake discs. We were extremely proactive. We tried to be as proactive as possible with our communications, and the general manager led a press conference early that afternoon on the scene, and we also released the video of as the train moved past the point of impact with that brake disc. We released that video to the public. So if we move to the next day, in the early hours of Saturday, the train was re-railed. It was actually a pretty complex operation because it was on the aerial structure and there was a gradient at an angle. So as you can imagine, moving a very heavy piece of metal on a gradient on an aerial structure was an extremely sensitive operation, which was executed well by the team. Those trains were then transported to Alexandria Rail Yard, where they were, that train, the 7000 series train, and the 3000 series rail car was examined at Alexandria Yard. Immediately, once the track engineers had completed their inspection of the track, repairs began that morning. So we had this preliminary conclusion that there was some kind of issue with the brake disc, and it was a fair conclusion that the bolts was something that we should pay attention to. So the general manager promptly ordered that those 2000 and 3000 fleets were held from service that day until enhanced inspections were completed and any necessary repairs were completed. So that was the day after. If we move into the following days of that week, track repairs, and I'll give you a little more detail in a second, were completed on Monday night, and then we returned to a normal service pattern without single tracking on Tuesday, and the scheduled service that customers could expect returned on that Thursday morning. And then I'm losing track of the weeks. Is it this week? The week of the 8th of October. Thank you. The brake disc repairs were completed on Tuesday, and then the investigation was continuing, and we had sort of mirroring the National Transportation Safety Board approach to investigations. We had an all-parties collaboration session with the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission on Tuesday. We had intended to complete an after-action review this week. However, due to the short week and key people being absent, we have pushed that to next week. So we look forward to the conclusions of that. So having completed the timeline, I now want to just outline the details about the investigation. So the investigation into the probable cause of the derailment remains open, as I said. There are three complementary levels of investigation that I wish to explain to you. The first is the technical investigation led by specialist internal teams in respective areas, and that's primarily the rail engineers, in this case under Shashil. The second level investigation is an internal investigation led by my team in the Department of Safety, where specialist investigators gather evidence from all departments involved and compare what was done or found against policies, procedures, and regulations. The third layer of investigation is by external oversight agencies due to the nature of the incident, a derailment. In this case, the National Transportation Safety Board and the Federal Transit Administration, because of very good relationships established from the October 2021 derailment, have been kept informed, but they decided in these circumstances to not deploy resources. Instead, it has been left to the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission to lead the external oversight investigation. So all three levels of investigation collaborate and share information, and we are looking to identify the probable cause, but also areas to improve. The investigations have considered all possible aspects of the incident, including the initial response and management of the incident, the rail cars involved, including specific parts of the rail car, like the brake disc from that 3000 series rail car, and the maintenance procedures associated with those parts. The investigations have also considered the condition of the track and the signal system to eliminate other possible causes. The back-to-back measurements of all rail cars involved were sound. In the hours and days following the derailment, the Chief Mechalco Officer, Shashil, took steps to rapidly mitigate risks surrounding the brake disc that became dislodged from that 3000 series rail car and ended up causing the 7000 series train to derail. In addition to investigative responsibilities, my team in the Department of Safety has also taken a proactive role overseeing and assuring those mitigation actions. It has been sensible to focus attention on how the brake disc is fixed to the train, namely the brake disc bolts. All 352 2000 and 3000 series rail cars were inspected to ensure no bolts were loose or defective. If a loose or defective bolt was found, all 8 bolts were replaced on that brake disc. My team has conducted over 100 observations of the brake disc bolt inspections and the replacements of those bolts to ensure the procedures are being followed and to a high standard. So in this photo on the slide, you can see evidence of the procedure being followed correctly. So I'll just talk you through this. You can see the 8 bolts, and then there are safety wires that connect the bolts in pairs, and they keep the bolts tightly torqued. A very simple but clever way of ensuring that they're tight. The orange torque stripe that you can see is like wax that breaks should the bolt move. So it's a good indicator if there might be a problem. And then the 3 white dots that you can see around next to each of those bolts is simply the mechanic's record to confirm they have completed each step of the 3-step torque procedure. So just a little detail on the track repairs. While our track and structure specialists maintain track every day across the system, the repairs of the 310 feet of damaged track were slightly challenging in this case. In order to protect the integrity of the aerial structure itself, track engineers had to be precise when drilling the 494 holes in the concrete to install the new studs. The derailed car had broken multiple studs, fasteners, and bolts, which all combined to connect the rails to the concrete below it. The team replaced over 247 fasteners. As is usual after track repairs, ultrasonic technology was used to check for defects, and a track geometry vehicle was run over the track to ensure correct alignment. And that work and testing was completed in 3 days. The internal recovery from this incident was driven by coordination meetings led by the Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Dwyer, multiple times a day in those early days, sharing critical information to manage risk effectively, make decisions, and ensure messaging to customers was always front and center. Communication with customers at all stages has been a priority. We have ensured customers knew what we knew and have dealt with the situation with their best interests in mind. These slides provide some examples of the varied and regular communications. Please do not strive to read that small text. It's the images that we want to get across to you in this discussion. On the left here, we have the early press conference that the general manager led at the scene. And then on the right, the clear explanation of the next day decision to move to an inspection of those 2000 and 3000 series railcar bolts. Then we have an example of messaging of service impacts as soon as we knew them and what service we could provide the next day, and showing customers exactly what we were doing on the left here to inspect those brake disc bolts. We released that video so people knew exactly what we were doing. And then we were communicating how service returned to normal in the subsequent days. We have wanted to provide information that is helpful, clear, accurate, and transparent, and have posted updates several times a day. So what I'll now do is I'll hand over to Shashil to give you more detail on those 2 and 3000 series railcars.
Thank you, Jamie. Good morning, all. I'd like to start off with a brief explanation of the friction disc assemblies. Important to note, on all of our Class 1 vehicles or the rail cars that passengers use for transit, the braking effort is actually achieved by a combination of dynamic braking and friction braking. So the friction disc assemblies are a component of the friction brake only. It's very similar functionally to the way braking works on your car. So the brake disc is engaged by brake calipers, which have brake pads, and that provides the friction braking effort. Again, exactly as it would on your car if you were braking while driving. This animation provides a brief overview of the assembly process. The friction brake assemblies are mounted to the wheel hub using a spacer, and each assembly is held in place with 8 bolts. There are 8 friction disc assemblies per car. So as Jamie indicated, immediately following the event, we conducted an inspection of the entire fleet, which was approximately 2,800 friction disc assemblies, and we physically inspected each of the over 22,500 bolts. Important to note that we are now incorporating enhanced procedures in addition to Metro's existing procedures. So we have conducted a benchmarking survey of the industry, as well as review of the OEM recommended maintenance practices to ensure that we are conforming with those. And Metro's existing practice of a visual inspection daily, as well as our periodic inspection, which is every 60 days for all fleets, currently incorporates a visual inspection of every bolt on the fleet. In addition to the visual inspection and above what the industry norm is, we also do a physical inspection of every bolt. So the mechanics physically reach every bolt and actuate it by hand. We are now implementing a new requirement, which is to apply a calibrated torque wrench and physically torque check each individual bolt of the 2K, 3K fleet. And this is well above and beyond the industry recommended procedures and adds additional conservatism over our existing process. One more. Just to capture the state of the fleets, this has been communicated before. The 2000 and 3000 series fleets were manufactured by Breda. That company is now purchased and part of a different entity. But they are the oldest fleets in our service. They are split 76 and 276 cars, respectively, between the 2 and 3000 series fleets. And as you can see on the slide, they're at end of life, about 40 years old. And there are ongoing efforts that we've spoken about at different meetings with the 8000 series procurement as part of Metro's strategy for retiring these fleets. A lot of information, so happy to stop here and take any questions, please.
This presentation was really, really helpful. Thank you so much. And I can imagine that the maintenance team is ready to say bye to the 2 and 3Ks after the last couple of years. So it sounds like, you know, clearly there's an opportunity to improve the inspection protocol for the brake discs, and it's already been implemented.
That's correct.
And have we fully walked the WMSC through that?
So they have received the inspection processes that we conducted as the campaign, as well as our processes moving forward for the inspection. So yes.
And they've also visited rail yards to see it taking place. They've been invited to all the rail yards for the inspections as well as the replacements.
Will they join the after-action review as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Looking forward to hearing how that goes. Any other questions from committee members? Mr. Smedberg.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I just think the way in which this was all handled by the team, you know, Teresa, Andy, you all, was just really well done. And I think getting the video out was really helpful at an important time. So just wanted to say that publicly. Thank you.
Gentlemen, committee.
All right, any questions? Yep.
I mean, there's a certain element of machines where things happen, right? I mean, and it happens. How many of us have ever had an airplane delayed because of a mechanical problem or so on? So I just appreciate the level of detail and transparency about what happened and, most importantly, what we're doing about it. And I think, you know, looking historically at some of these incidents over time at Metro, this is a new level of transparency and I think effectiveness at dealing these. And I just really wanted to say that. So I appreciate that work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Yeah, I always appreciate it when the Dulles supervisor can bring up an airplane-related analogy. So thanks for that. And, you know, I think this does highlight, though, everyone's talking about how great the video is, but the 2 and 3Ks don't have cameras on the front. And so we are actually just lucky that it was a 7K that was behind the 3K that dropped the brake disc. And we would not have been able to provide this transparency if the trains had been in a different sequence. So I just, what a helpful reminder of how important capital funding is. If there's no further business to come before the committee, we can adjourn. And that concludes the board's business for today. Thank you for joining us.